Has your company ever fired an employee or disciplined an employee for their religious beliefs?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, that's interesting because Senator Cotton just read at some length into the record an EEOC lawsuit. That's a government lawsuit, which your company just settled after an adverse ruling by a federal district court in which you apparently took disciplinary action to the extent of firing employees in Arkansas based on their religious beliefs. Do you think that's workplace inclusion?
Well, as I told Senator Cotton, I personally am not aware of the details of that.
How is that possible? You're being sued by the federal government. You've settled the suit and you don't know about it? Mr. McMullen, Mr. Shankaran, let me start with you. In the course of preparing for this hearing, I came across a slide deck that was apparently prepared by both of your companies together. I've got it here. On one of the slides, you talk about your complementary ESG strategies, and you put this forward as a reason to move forward with the merger. Now, ESG refers to environmental, social, and governance considerations. And you talk here about your shared commitment to workforce diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let's just talk about that for a second, if we could. Maybe let's start with you, Mr. McMullen. Give me your sense of what you mean by workforce inclusion. Does that include religious commitments? Are those relevant to workforce inclusion?
Yeah, when you look at our overall ESG commitments, obviously the amount of impact that we have from an energy usage standpoint is incredibly important. To have a company that's inclusive in terms of from diversity, equity, inclusion, that means including everybody. People are promoted and rewarded based on their success and ability to be a leader in the organization and contribute to the organization. And we do not make judgments on anybody in terms of any of their personal beliefs and do not think that's appropriate either.
So that includes people of faith, I think is what you're saying.
It includes everything.
So has your company ever fired an employee or disciplined an employee for their religious beliefs?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, that's interesting because Senator Cotton just read at some length into the record an EEOC lawsuit. That's a government lawsuit, which your company just settled after an adverse ruling by a federal district court in which you apparently took disciplinary action to the extent of firing employees in Arkansas based on their religious beliefs. Do you think that's workplace inclusion?
Well, as I told Senator Cotton, I personally am not aware of the details of that.
How is that possible? You're being sued by the federal government. You've settled the suit and you don't know about it?
No, I do not always know about it.
Well, that's extraordinary. Do your shareholders know about that? I mean, what else do you not know about? What about you, Mr. Shankaran? Has your company ever fired someone like Mr. McMullen's has based on their religious beliefs?
Senator, nothing that I know of. When we think about our diversity and inclusion agenda, Senator, we work in communities, we're in Chicago, we're in Alaska, we're in Montana, we're in DC, and we make sure that our stores represent the communities that we support, and we recruit from the communities to serve the communities. That's the fundamental principle of our diversity and inclusion effort.
Let me just ask you about this. Why would having complementary ESG strategies be a justification for a merger? Why would that be relevant at all?
Well, if you look at some of the things that both of us have done from Kroger's commitment to zero hunger, zero waste, and we've made the commitment, if we operate in a market, there'll be zero hunger in that market, and we'll work with everybody, and especially food banks. We've provided 2.3 billion meals. By merging with Albertsons, as an example, we'll be able to have that positive impact and really further grow on what both of our companies have done individually.
Don't you think you should be asking what positive impact you're going to have on the people you serve? Like, for instance, the ability to provide food at a reasonable cost to people who need it, the ability to actually offer a product that consumers need and want. Here's what I find interesting. Lena Khan sat where you're sitting, she's the chairwoman of the FTC, just a few weeks ago, and she testified under oath that she's seeing an accelerating trend of companies justifying mergers on the basis of ESG, as if that should somehow allow them to evade scrutiny for the merger. She testified that she thought it had absolutely no relevance whatsoever. And I think that she is absolutely correct. The fact that you're using this as a justification for your merger, I think, frankly, is ridiculous. But maybe let's talk about one or two things that I think are relevant. What are your plans for closing stores upon the consummation of this merger? How many stores do you plan to close? Mr. McMullen, start with you.
We do not plan to close stores as part of this merger.
Zero?
Zero.
Mr. Shankaran?
Senator, as the CEO of the new company, Mr. McMullen makes those decisions, but as he said, he plans to close 0 stores.
And so you won't be shuttering them in any form, not spinning them off, not giving them away. You're going to keep everything open in your current footprint.
Yes, but we will work with the FTC in terms of divesting stores to a viable competitor, and if that's not successful, using the SpinCo structure as well.
Well, what does that mean? I mean, how many stores are you going to spin off then?
We don't know. We're in active conversations with the FTC, and as we're going through that process with the FTC, there'll be a combined agreement. There'll be an agreement with the FTC in terms of how that's handled.
How do you plan to reduce your workforce as a outcome of this merger? How many layoffs are we talking about?
We will not lay off any frontline workers as a part of this.
What does that mean? No workers?
If you look at frontline workers,
You're inserting the word frontline. Let's just stay with worker.
Frontline would be warehouses, manufacturing plants, stores. There would be no layoffs.
So no layoffs at all?
No layoffs on any of those positions, sir.
Well, what positions would you consider laying off then?
Well, together we'll look at, from an administrative support standpoint, we'll look at, if you look at historically, when we've merged with companies on Harris Teeter and Roundy's, things like that, we've ended up not laying off anybody because what we have found is the merged companies do things better than we do. And one of the key things is making sure they're finding the best of both.
Let me ask you this, Mr. McMullen, and I'm sure Senator Durbin wants to ask questions here, so I'll hand it over here in just a second. But you have, as I think you testified earlier, you conducted a stock buyback recently of I think about $1 billion. Why not give that money, pass that money along to your associates, as you say, in the form of higher wages?
Yeah, as I shared earlier, we've invested an incremental $1.2 billion in associate wages over the last 4 years.
Could have been $2 billion if you hadn't have done the stock buybacks.
We also spent over $1 billion, right at $1 billion, improving pension benefits as well. And it's really balancing all the constituents when you look at customers, associates, communities, and shareholders. Back to your earlier comments, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Kroger has made public commitments to spend billions of dollars to lower prices, to improve its stores, and to raise wages. And those, of course, are just words. It's actions that matter. Mr. McMullen, I'd like to start with you. Now, Kroger announced a $1 billion stock buyback at the end of last year, at the end of 2021. This is consumers were suffering from record inflation and skyrocketing grocery store prices. Things have gotten considerably worse since then compared to food costs just in January of 2021, just the beginning of last year. The average U.S. household paid an additional $110 for food in the month of October of 2022. The average Utah household paid an additional $125 in October of 2022, so it's even worse in Utah. If Kroger wasn't passing on savings to consumers when it was competing with Albertsons, because competition very often is what brings down prices. It's one of the few things that can be counter-inflationary. When you've got people competing against each other, it tends to bring down price and enhance quality. Then why would we think it would pass on savings after it eliminates that competition?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. The commitment that we've made as a company, and if you look at our track record, would support that. We've lowered our pricing by over 3% if you look at since 2003, and on an annual basis, that works out to $5 billion per year. If you look at our merger with Harris Teeter, we've lowered our gross profit rate to more than $100 million per year there. If you look at our merger with Roundy's in Wisconsin, we've also lowered pricing there by about $130 million per year. So it's really, when you look at our fundamental model, what we have found is increasing and lowering pricing relative to any of our competitors. And I define competition pretty broad, so Walmart would obviously be our largest competitor, Costco would be number 2, and et cetera. We continually, what we have found is by giving customers a better value, using personalized pricing for each household based on what's really important to that household and passing those savings, that creates more loyalty. And then we also really focus on fresh foods. And That's really, from a competitive standpoint, we always try to make sure that we have the freshest product in the market, so it will last longer for the customer when they get it home.
These commitments that you're describing, price-wise and otherwise, are those binding commitments?
They're legal. From a legal standpoint, sir, I don't know the answer to that, but from a business standpoint, that is our commitment.
Right.
And absolutely.
I can't imagine that they would be binding unless it were built into a condition of the approval. Mr. Sankaran, Albertsons just proposed handing out $4 billion to its shareholders, which dwarfs the $2.8 billion in commitments tied to the merger. Why do Kroger and Albertsons need to merge in order to lower their prices and treat their employees better when it seems like they already have the money to do so now?
So regarding the dividend, I know there's been a lot of interest on it. I want to re-emphasize a couple of things. First is the Albertsons companies is in excellent financial condition, and that was the case before the dividend payment and will remain the case after the dividend payment. And we are in an excellent financial condition because over the last several years, as I mentioned in my opening statement, the Albertsons companies has bought a number of distressed stores, 400 stores from Super Value. Subsequently, the Safeway stores turned stores around by investing over that time frame $11.5 billion into turning around those stores, an additional $1.5 billion into the communities that we operate in, and in every year since the merger of Safeway, increasing wages, and at the same time becoming more competitive. We had not returned cash to shareholders over that time frame, and this $4 billion is a return of cash to those shareholders who have supported us over this decade, and has nothing to do with the merger itself.
I want to revisit Albertsons' purchase of Safeway, the transaction I mentioned in my opening remarks. I don't think it's controversial to say that when divested assets required to be divested in connection with the merger head to bankruptcy in less than a year, just 9 months, and then end up simply being reacquired by the merged firm, that remedy is an embarrassing failure. You have any response to that?
Senator, the divested stores and the buyer were both at that time qualified, approved by the FTC. We did everything we could to help the Hagen stores at that time, and when it didn't work, we bought it. But if you step back and look at the bigger picture, the merger, by any measure, is a success, where we put two companies together, one of them struggling, and have turned them around, and we're sitting at this table with the financial performance we have because of that merger.
Can I ask one more very quick Mr. McMullen, my time's about out. With personalized pricing, does that just mean they charge different prices to different consumers? And isn't that all you mean by that, the personalized pricing?
No, personalized pricing would be what's most important to that household. So if it's a customer on a budget, they're much more focused on entry price point items, so you would identify items that are most interested for that customer. So it's really looking at each household, what's important to them, and personalizing offers for that particular household.
Okay, I see my time's expired. Thanks.